Hey everybody, and welcome back. I got another video for you today. I made a video a couple weeks ago where I made some 3-pound tall skinny bottles, but that was in a time lapse. I thought today I would actually make one or two of those and do it regular speed and have a little conversation with you as well, and definitely give some tips on how I make these, some kind of insight, and then do some slip decoration on them as well and kind of talk through a little bit of that. And so that's what we're going to be making today, so let's get started. Alright, so we're going to get started. I've got 3 pounds of clay here on the wheel, and I've got a couple previous skinny bottles that I've made here in the last few minutes, and we'll get started and talk through what's going on here. So this clay, number one, is fairly stiff. If you're a potter and you can watched any of my other videos, you can probably tell just by the fact of how little this is moving and the amount of pressure I'm applying to it that I've got fairly stiff clay here. That's definitely on purpose. This clay that I got was a little bit softer when I bought it, and I had to set it out and stiffen it up and run it through a pug mill just to get it more stiff so that it could handle making a tall skinny shape. Probably one of the most important things of being able to make a tall skinny piece, especially with any decent amount of shape, and to get the weight out of the bottom, is to use a clay that's a little bit more stiff. It just allows the structure of the piece to hold itself up as you pull and get the weight out of the bottom. So of course the basics are all the same, even though every potter in the world will do those simple basics at the beginning a little bit different. I have learned, like I said, that using that stiffer clay, it maybe take a little bit more energy to get the clay centered and running true, but that really makes a world of difference. And also making more elegant pieces, I've learned to spend a little bit more time getting that clay perfectly centered, and it helps you in the long run. So you see that first pull that I did there. After I open up the clay ball, I kind of grab that clay with both my hands kind of like this and kind of run it up, kind of curl it up with my thumbs. Then I'm going to do for my next pull is take the knuckle on the index finger on my right hand, that knuckle right there. I'm going to pinch in with it and pull up. Of course, I keep the sponge in my right hand all the time to kind of keep that clay moist just above where I'm pulling. And then in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years, I started using a different technique for pulling. I started using my fingertip of my middle finger on my right hand. Just have noticed it's given me a lot more control and helped me really dig in there at the bottom and get a lot of the extra clay out of the bottom. Now the first couple pulls that I do, I'm not pulling nearly as much clay as I really could. But that's another thing that I've learned, that if you're going to make a tall piece, you don't want to pull too much at the beginning or too much at one time. You can see that the top section there, I still have a pretty good thickness of 1/4 of an inch or so up there, because I want to extend that clay all the way up, and if you pull too much of that top half to begin with, it's going to cause you troubles in the long run. And you can see each time before I make a pull, I'm going to take my finger and clean me a spot off around the bottom to really be able to dig in and pull. And then I add water to the rim that goes down inside and over the outside. Get down there to the bottom and really dig in. My fingertip also allows me to have a lot more control, make a really smooth, clean pull. A little air or something in the clay there, about 3/4 of the way up. You can see that little bit of a ripple, but I can work with that, work around it. You see I pulled a little bit extra that time. We got a little bit of wobble on the bottom, but by the time I pull one more time, I'll smooth all that out, and then by the time I shape it, we won't even really see that anymore. There are definitely certain clays that are more plastic than others. This is definitely not the most plastic or elastic clay that there is, but it's a clay that works really well for wood firing and for salt glaze. Can handle the temperature, but also it it's made out of some local clay, as well as just gives a good sheen and a good shine to the piece because of the materials that are in it. You see, one of the first things I'm going to do with this rib is go back and just kind of smooth that up. I'm not really shaping too much at that point, other than just making it smooth so that as I continue to work with it, that wobble doesn't accentuate and get worse. Learned I can work with pieces that have that little bit of wobble in them, and just kind of work with them as I go. Not every piece I make is going to be perfect, and well, none of them are going to be perfect, but you know what I mean. None of them are going to always comply. There are some pieces that you make that just kind of end up, the fact that they're perfectly centered from start to finish, and you feel like $1,000,000, and the next one you put on the wheel just falls apart or has a wobble to it, and just keeps you humble, I guess. So working with clay that's always going to have some impurities in it. So just trying to get that wall, not necessarily straight up and down, but get a straight line going. I like to actually have them taper in a little bit as it goes up, but sometimes it goes straight up and down, but most of the time it's got a little bit of a taper. Clean that water out of the bottom. Now I'm going to add a little bit of water back to just to the top quarter there, or top maybe third of it, and pinch that in. You'll see a little bit of a wobble show up as I pinch that in, so I try not to pinch too much at one time. Come back and wet the top and then cut that off with my needle tool. Even it right up, and that may show up again, but I've got enough clay up here in the top that I can continue to do that and still end up with a really good amount of clay up here to work with to make a decorative top on this bottle. So now what I'm going to do is, before I get too much farther, you see it started to bow out right there. I want to come back with my rib and kind of keep that in check, keep that shape in line as I'm going. If it gets too accentuated, it can be harder and harder to push back in. So something I want to keep an eye on as I'm throwing this. Alright, pinch that in a little bit more. Now I'm actually going to pull it because I got enough thickness there that I want to pull this a little bit. Pull it up and kind of bring out that wobble, and then I want to cut it off, and then I can do my final shape now that I'm done tapering that in. I do all kinds of different shapes on the top of these depending on how much clay's there, what the bottom looks like, and so I just kind of play around with it as I go. Just kind of, sometimes I'll put a top on it and I'll step back and look at it and I'll be like, nah, not really my favorite, so I might change it a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks better there than the more bulbous top. Still kind of tapers back in at the top, but it's not quite as round. Definitely goes with the shape a little bit more, seeing this is so tall and slender. Kind of give some roundness to the top, and reverse that taper that went in here. Go out and then back in a little bit. And now I'm going to take my tool here, my rib, and take the pointy end here, and take this hand on the bottom, and I'm going to stick the pointy end down near the bat and just kind of clean up around the bottom of the piece, but smoothing it over with my left hand while I do that. Add some water, and then I'm going to take this point of the tool and I'm going to make a little design, finish off the bottom, but also that gives a little glaze catch there for any extra glaze or salt that may run down the piece as it's being fired. Keep the piece from sticking to the shelf or to the wads that are on the piece, and then clean off the extra water with my sponge here, and we're done with throwing the piece. Now we're gonna do a little slip decoration. So a lot of times I'll come back, sometimes depending on what design I'm gonna do, I'll come back and decorate these after they stiffen up a little bit. But if I'm doing pretty simple decoration, or decoration that can be done on the wheel, I'll do it right now. It just saves me the time later on from having to pick this piece back up and decorate it later. So if I was, one of the things that I love doing is just my little dots, or white dots that I do, or I do them in different colors. One of the things I do to help me get those straight, it's not magic. I just take my needle tool and I'm going to make a little line Just a real faint line on my piece all the way around as I spin the wheel. That's going to give me my first line of dots as I go around, and then from there I can kind of make sure that they go straight around. So this is just a hair dye applicator bottle that I bought at Sally's, and mixed up my white slip in this, and then what I'm going to do is just start by putting a dot on. I'm going to move around the side here so you guys can kind of see what's going on as I'm doing this. So I started just below that line that I made with my needle tool so that I can come back later and erase that line with my finger. So I'm just going to space it out a little bit. I don't have an exact measurement to how far I want them spaced. Just kind of go with it, and as it gets closer to wrapping back around, kind of like if you're doing a flute on a bowl or a pie plate, you kind of just learn over time. You make a certain distance, and as you get maybe 2 or 3 dots from, or flutes from, connecting back to where you started, you can then adjust slightly the distance so that you can kind of make it work out. And some people like to say, well, you got that to work out perfect. Well, no, not exactly, but I just kind of adjusted it as I got closer so that it looks finished. It looks like it's evened up. It's never going to be perfect, but that's part of the great thing about making pottery and making pieces, making any kind of artwork handmade, is it's never perfect. But of course we always strive to get better and better. Make things look as neat and as refined. At least that's one of my goals, just to make really refined shape, refined decoration, just to really show off the years of work that I've put into developing the skill. As I just heard about a week ago that somebody said a quote that repetition is the mother of all skill, and so just by doing things over and over and over again, you can get good at them and really develop the skill. Nobody's born with a skill set of any certain kind. Skills are developed. Definitely there are talents that people are given, I believe, but skills are developed by hard work, repetition, and definitely having some good coaching, good mentorship always helps as well. I like to work in not necessarily odd numbers as far as the numbers going around, but in the number of lines here I'm going to make. I think odd numbers a lot of times are more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, so I'm going to work with, this one's going to have 5 rows of dots alternating here. A lot of times I'll do 3 or 5, just depending on the size of the piece, what I feel like doing. So you go. So there's 5 rows of dots, and put that slip bottle up, and then what I'm going to do is come back and wet my finger just a little bit and smooth up that line there, and you'll never know how I got those dots to be so straight around. I'm going to come back just to mirror this a little bit up here. I'm going to put maybe I don't know if 1 or 3 rows of dots up here on the top. I'm not necessarily going to try to match them up either with the number of dots down there on the bottom. But just kind of carry that theme up to the top of the piece as well. Yeah, I definitely think I'll go ahead and go with 3 rows. So there you go. Now I have a piece that is thrown and slip decorated. All I'm going to do now is I've got a twisted wire here that I'm going to take and spin the wheel slowly and pull this wire underneath it to give a little neat decoration to the bottom. Sorry for the cut there. I had a cough. I've been holding it back for a couple minutes, and I just had to finally let it go. So I pulled the wire under that. Now I'm going to lift it off, set it on this back here. and we're done with that bottle, and I'm going to continue to make some more. So hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like it on Facebook or YouTube, share it, and hopefully some of you guys will see you in September at that Potter's Market Invitational. And you guys have a good day. Thanks. Bye.